PFL 5 2024 regular season full card predictions, starting at the bottom of the card, making my way to the top as always. Not going to say much about the first fight. Nothing really too much to say about it, to be honest. Brian Zurcher versus Julian Ruiz. I'm going with Zurcher here. Neither guy's fought a great level of competition, but at least Zurcher has some decent enough wins. Julian Ruiz has only beaten opponents with negative records or 0-0 records. He hasn't beaten anyone of note. 3-4 opponent, 2-3. You can just look through his record; hasn't fought anybody. So I'm going to be going with Zurcher here. Not much else to say about it. I'll just move right on to the next one. First real fight of the night is Andrew Sanchez versus Carl Albrechtsen. I'm going with Carl Albrechtsen here, and the reason is Andrew Sanchez. One, he falls apart as the fight goes on. He's fallen apart as the fight goes on in the UFC multiple times, multiple round 3 losses. Anthony Smith lost in round 3. Ryan James got finished in round 3. If you keep looking through his record, he lost to Vittori, which I guess isn't a bad loss, but Bruno Silva lost in round 3. Mahmoud Muradov lost in round 3. So a lot of his losses are when he starts getting tired and slowing down, and he starts getting, kind of the volume and stuff poured on him. I think Albrechtsen can implement something similar. I do think he's the much fresher fighter at only 30 years old versus a 36-year-old Sanchez. Sanchez, obviously a former UFC fighter, probably fought the better level overall of competition. Although Carl Albrechtsen has fought some decent opponents in his own right. He fought Grant Neal, Carl Moore, and back in the day he actually fought Yuri Prohaska, Valentin Moldavsky. He's fought some pretty solid opponents in his own right. Yuri Prohaska obviously being the best opponent he's fought. For Sanchez, I just think it's a little bit too much to ask for at this age. I know he's coming off of 2 wins, but the Taylor Johnson fight, that wasn't a great look for him. I really didn't think he looked good in that one. And then Gabriel Checo. I just don't think Andrew Sanchez has much to give anymore. He is a wrestler. He was a college wrestler, but that was so long ago. And he's not great at holding people down. He can take guys down occasionally, but he's not the most athletic guy in the world. I do think Carl Albrechtsen, even though he has been taken down in some of his previous fights, the Grant Neal fight he was taken down in, and a few of his fights he lost because his opponents could implement some wrestling, but I think his striking is a lot better. I think Sanchez is very slow, very plodding on the feet, and I think this will play out mostly on the feet. So I'm taking Carl Albrechtsen to get it done. Moving along, we have Anthony Romero versus Sergio Casio. I'm going with Anthony Romero here. Ultimately, what I think will happen is Romero will be able to take down Casio and just out-grapple him. Romero is a black belt. I know he lost to Oliver Albin Mercier, but that's because OAM is a very, very, I'd say he's a pretty elite fighter. He could probably be like borderline, if not top 15 in the UFC. I know OAM retired, so he's not fighting anymore. Mercier, OAM. But he's a very good fighter. He was obviously the champion. I think he was a 2-time champion in the PFL. Really, really solid fighter, well-rounded, very good grappling. He was also juiced to the gills. You could tell OAM was juiced to the gills. And in this fight, Sergio Casio, maybe he's juiced as well. I wouldn't be surprised. But the last fight that Casio had against Jesse Roberts, I was watching that fight back. He was taken down and basically mounted, got his back taken. He was out-grappled the entire fight up until round 3. Where he ended up submitting Jesse Roberts with a triangle. And I understand that's a good submission to have, I can't even say it's really a great win. Jesse Roberts, it's solid. It's a good that he took the beating and came back and won, but it's like he was on his way to losing that fight. He was down 2 rounds, even though the 3rd round he started to look good. He was going to lose the fight up until that submission. I don't think Romero will get submitted by Casio. I think he'll be much more aware. He showed in the Antonio Caruso fight, where was that? Right here. In the Antonio Caruso fight, he showed decent judo and offensive grappling. He took him down with a few different trips and throws against the cage. I think he can implement a similar game plan here, just out-wrestle Sergio Casio. I don't think he'll play out too much on the feet. If it does, Casio is a guy that he's not going to quit on himself. He's tough, as most Mexican fighters are very tough. And aren't going to quit on themselves. They're going to fight. They're going to keep on fighting and keep grinding, which I do think Casio will press forward and try to do that. But I just think the more technical guy, the better grappler of the two is Anthony Romero. So I do think he'll be able to get it done because of the lacking takedown defense of Casio. Next fight we have is Michael Dufort versus Adam Piccolotti. I'm actually going to go with Michael Dufort here. I understand Piccolotti has fought the better competition of the two for the most part. I mean, Michael Dufort, his last 5 out, probably his best win. Luis Pena, former UFC fighter, that's a solid win in round 1. Mads Burnell was, I don't know, he wasn't a Bellator champion, but he's a solid enough fighter. I believe he is fighting in the main event against Clay Collard. So that should be an interesting fight in the main event. But as far as this one goes, Dufort and Piccolotti, I do favor Dufort because Piccolotti, he was just flying knee KO 2 months ago by Elvin Espinoza, who I don't really rate super highly. I think Espinoza, he's okay, but I wasn't really super impressed with Espinoza. I picked Piccolotti in that fight. I'm not sure if I made a video for that, but my pick either way was Piccolotti. I thought Piccolotti would be able to beat Elvin Espinoza. I just thought Espinoza was, hadn't really fought any decent level of competition. And Piccolotti was like a minus 1100 on the live line. I rewatched the fight, and I saw that Piccolotti was winning the fight clearly. He was way ahead on the live odds, like minus 1200, minus 1100. And then he got flying knee KO'd in round 3 and ended up losing. Unless something like that, I mean, if someone like Elvin Espinoza can flying knee KO you 2 months ago, Michael Dufort, he's not a great striker. I think his striking technique is pretty bad. But Piccolotti just got knocked out 2 months ago. He's 35 years old now. Neither guy's a fantastic striker. I think Dufort does have very slick jiu-jitsu, opportunistic jiu-jitsu. He does have good guillotines. Most of his wins are by submission. 10 of his wins are by sub. If it goes a distance, I could see, sure, Piccolotti might be able to get it done. A lot of Dufort's decision equity isn't extremely high because, like I said, he's not the best striker, and he does rely on his grappling a good amount. But Piccolotti, I just feel like he's a little bit past his prime here. He beat Mandel Nalo by submission. Nalo is not the grappler Dufort is, in my opinion. Mansour Barnaoui out-grappled him, submitted him. Beat Georgie Karakhanyan, lost to Sidney Outlaw by split. I just think a grappler, when he fights like solid grapplers, he usually tends to lose. And I think that's what Dufort is, a solid grappler. Strong guy as well. I think he'll be able to try to push Piccolotti up against the cage, probably mix in some takedowns in order to get this one done. I get why some people might like Piccolotti just because he's fought pretty solid competition throughout his career, but I think Michael Dufort should be able to win this one, especially if he can get the grappling going. Moving on to the Elvin Espinoza fight, which I was just talking about him. I don't really like Elvin Espinoza. He's fighting Gadzi Rabadanov. Obviously, Gadzi Rabadanov is training out of the same gym as, basically the Team Habib Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov school in Dagestan. That's the gym he's training out of. He's fighting out of there. So he's getting training in, obviously, with the likes of Habib, Islam, Usman, Nurmagomedov. I know they haven't been around recently. They were in New Jersey, obviously, for the Islam fight coming up. But regardless, Gadzi, he's been training with Team Habib. He has that kind of similar style to a lot of the Dagestanis. He's not a pressure wrestler necessarily. He's more of like a striker that can wrestle on the side. But I just don't like Elvin Espinoza's game. I think Gadzi can take him down pretty much if he wants to. Maybe not at will, but I think he can take him down if he wants to. Outside of like a flying knee or like something crazy from Espinoza, I don't think Rabadanov should lose here. I think the level of competition and overall experience heavily favors Gadzi Rabadanov. He's also the younger guy slightly. He's a few months younger. He's fought the way superior competition. As I mentioned, he's getting in work with Habib, Islam, Usman, all those guys. He has solid striking too. I think his striking is better than Espinoza's. The striking, he showed good striking against Salman Renfro, who I actually think is a pretty solid striker. I don't think Salman Renfro is like a terrible fighter. I know some people don't rate him highly, but I actually think Salman Renfro is pretty solid. And the fact that Gadzi was ripping him with good body shots, his striking looked pretty solid in that fight. And he mixed in, he looked good in the clinch as well, threw a bunch of knees in the clinch that landed, kind of wore down the body of Renfro and implemented some takedowns as well. I think the takedown threat's going to be there for Gadzi. I think he can mix in some wrestling with his striking. And I think he's just one of those guys that he might not look the most impressive in his fights, but he's just going to get it done cleanly by just utilizing his striking. And then if Espinoza gets comfortable, he'll mix in the wrestling, try to get him out of rhythm, out of sync. I think he'll do that. Um, Godzi also, he can rack up the control time in dominant positions. He got Renfro in the body triangle. If you look through a lot of his fights do go the distance for the most part. He beat J.J. Wilson, mixed in some wrestling there against Wilson, who's actually a pretty solid prospect overall. And I'm not saying he's going to hold down Espinoza completely, just hold him down for 3 rounds. I don't see that happening, but I just think when you mix things up, kind of like in a Bilal Muhammad type of way. I know a lot of people don't like Bilal, but if you kind of mix things up in that way, even if you can't get a lot of control, just mixing up the wrestling and getting people to think about it will open up the striking. So I do think Godzi will be able to win here, mixing those things up. Espinoza's competition level: Hopton Stewart, Corey Jackson, Demir Ferdak Bagov, Kiani Diggs, and then lastly Adam Piccolotti, who he was losing to up until that flying knee. I just don't think they're on the level of a Godzi or Bodnov. I think this is a big step up, and I think Godzi, I don't think this is a step up at all. I think this is similar to all of his other opponents. So give me Godzi Rabadinov. Next up, we have Sadabusi versus Tom Breese. I'm going with the dog here. I'm going with Tom Breese. I don't. First of all, I'm kind of confused. Not confused. I'm shocked how Sadabusi was able to make 170 to begin with in his few fights. He won the $1 million in the tournament before. That was 2022. I just don't think Sadabusi is necessarily that. Not that he's not good. Like he's a good. Sadabusi is a good fighter, but he was fighting at 170 for a lot of his fights. Now he's up at 205 because PFL doesn't have a middleweight division, so he has to fight at 205. And it's just interesting to see him at this weight class against Tom Breese, who I think Tom Breese could get the grappling going. I mean, we saw the Josh Silveira fight. Josh Silveira was able to take him down in the first minute or two of the fight, and then Sadabusi quit. I know people say Tom Breese is a bit of a quitter, and I get it. Like, Tom Breese has kind of, fallen apart in fights before. But even though he's fallen apart, it's like Sadabusi just quit because he injured his thumb. You know what I mean? He dislocated his. It's not like he broke his arm or something. He dislocated his thumb and he waved off the fight to the referee. So do I think Sadabusi, if he gets into some bad positions in the grappling, I've seen him give up before. I've seen him get submitted. I've seen him tap, very quickly to submissions instead of trying to fight out of it. I could see the same thing happening here. Tom Breese is very, very slick jiu-jitsu. Sadabusi is not the best grappler, especially. I know he has solid takedown defense at 170, but this is 205 now. You're fighting a big guy in Tom Breese. I think Tom Breese will 100% mix in those takedowns if he can get them. Even if he has to jump on the guillotine to get Sadabusi to the ground, he'll do whatever it takes. Sadabusi actually was submitted by guillotine by Magomed Karamov. And in the Tom Breese fight against Clayton Silva that I was watching, Breese jumped on the. That's how he got him down. I know it says I know he submitted him by rear naked choke, but he got him down by jumping the guillotine. And then obviously Silva rolled out of it, rolled himself right in the mount, and then he gave up his back, and Breese choked him out right after that. So I just don't think Sadabusi, especially look at the age difference as well, 32 to 37. I think he's already a millionaire. He already won the $1 million in 2022. I think a lot of those guys who won the million kind of don't have the same fire underneath them anymore. They don't have that same, drive to go be a champion again. I know OAM did it over Alban Mercier, but he's a little bit different. Look at all the other guys, even guys like Brendan Loughnane, who won the $1 million, came back not the same. And it's happened with plenty of other guys. It's happened with plenty of other guys who won the $1 million. They come back. They don't have the same fire. They don't. It's hard to wake up and try to. How do I describe this? It's hard to wake up early and go for a run in silk sheets. That's the saying, I believe. But I think it's pretty similar for Sadabusi. Now, I'll say this. Sadabusi is a very good striker. He can outstrike Tom Breese. Tom Breese has pretty shitty striking, if I'm being honest. But I think the grappling's one. I think it's grappler and striker type of matchup. And in this case, the much younger guy is Tom Breese. Sadabusi has been out grappled before on a few different occasions, and I just, I was not a fan of his last fight. You could say the same about Breese. Breese, he got finished by Rob Wilkinson in the first like 2 minutes, but I don't think Sadabusi is necessarily as physical and dominant as a guy like Rob Wilkinson. If Josh Silveira was able to take him down, I could see Tom Breese doing something similar. And if Breese gets on top, I think he is very, very dangerous with his jiu-jitsu. Most of his wins are by submission, Tom Breese. He has 13 wins by sub. I could see him getting one here. Headliner of the prelims, we have Brent Primus versus Solomon Renfro as our next fight, as our prelim headliner. In this one, I'm actually going to go with a guy that pretty much everyone's picking against here. Everyone's picking Brent Primus, 91% of people. I'm actually going to pick Solomon Renfro here as a huge well, not a huge underdog, but the people's underdog. 9% of people are picking him. I'm going with Solomon Renfro, and the reason being is because I think Brent Primus, this is also a striker-grappler matchup, and I know I just picked the grappler. I know I just picked against Sadabusi, who is a striker, and now I'm picking the striker and Solomon Renfro. The reason is because with Brent Primus, he doesn't have very good wrestling. I mean, sure, he's got some body lock takedowns, he's got some trips, he's got that sort of stuff. And he is a strong guy. He can muscle guys down occasionally. And if he gets you down, he'll look to get on top or look to, look for the body triangle, look to get to your back. And once he gets the body triangle in, he's almost impossible to get off of you. So I don't think Renfro will escape if Primus does get him down and takes his back. But on the feet, I don't rate Primus very highly. I think his striking's pretty below average. I think it's pretty shitty. If I'm being honest, I think his grappling is very good, very dominant, but his wrestling's not the best either. I just think, and if you look at Primus, a lot of his wins are against other Bruno Miranda, right? Bruno Miranda doesn't have good takedown defense whatsoever. That's always been a weak point of his game. We'll get to Bruno Miranda. He's fighting on this card, so we'll get to Bruno Miranda, but he's been taken down and out-grappled by multiple guys. Like I said, I'll get into that. Usman Nurmagomedov, I know, is a no contest because he tested positive for steroids, but he out-grappled. He basically just out-wrestled him, got on top. Primus couldn't really do anything. I know he's looking for some submissions and stuff, didn't get any. Mansawar Barnaoui beat him, but again, Barnaoui is a grappler. He's a guy that will look to push the grappling. He has no problem going to the mat. Alexander Shabli is a striker. What did he do? He kept the fight on the feet, knocked out Brent Primus. Benson Henderson, wrestler. And then if you look even prior to that, Brent Primus fought Islam Mamedov. Where was it? Yeah, he fought Islam Mamedov and he lost the split. I know some people thought he won off of his back, but the thing is, this guy, Brent Primus, a lot of the fights he's winning are against other grapplers or against guys that want to take him down. Solomon Renfro is not going to want to take him down. Solomon Renfro is going to want to keep this fight on the feet. And he showed solid takedown defense against a good overall fighter in Gadzi Rabadanov. I know he got taken down and even got his back taken in part of that fight. So people are going to say, oh, we got his back taken by Rabadanov. He's going to get choked out by Brent Primus. Gadzi Rabadanov is a way better overall fighter than Brent Primus. Brent Primus is a pure grappler. That's what he is. He's not a good striker. I don't think he's a great wrestler. I think Solomon Renfro, he's training out of Extreme Couture as well. He's training out of Extreme Couture with very good fighters. Extreme Couture, one of the best gyms in the sport. Only 27 years old, 27-year-old Renfro to the 39-year-old Primus. Look, if Primus gets him down, he's going to win. He's probably going to submit him or at least get to dominant grappling positions. So I'm not saying this is like 100% Renfro. I get it. If Primus gets him down, he's probably going to look like a big favorite. If Renfro keeps us on the feet for a round or 2 rounds, he probably knocks out Brent Primus. Brent Primus is very open. When he throws, he leaves his chin wide open in the air. Solomon Renfro hits hard. I think Solomon Renfro will be able to put a beating on Brent Primus if the fight stays on the feet. So I'm going with Solomon Renfro. I think if he keeps the fight on the feet, he's going to win clearly. I think if Primus takes to the ground, he's going to win clearly. So I'm going to go with the underdog, the younger guy in Renfro. I assume he's been making a lot of improvements fighting out of Extreme Couture now. Extreme Couture has a ton of good grapplers. Las Vegas in general has plenty of those guys to help him out here. I understand Primus is a really, really good grappler, but I do think Solomon Renfro can get this one done. I think if he keeps this on the feet, he wins. Moving along, we have first fight on the main card, which is Antonio Carlos Jr. versus Alex Polizzi. I'm going with ACJ, Antonio Carlos Jr. Alex Polizzi has lost 3 in a row, obviously, and even before that, he's not like destroying a lot of really good competition. Impa Kasanganay finished him. Carl Moore beat him, and Yoel Romero beat him. Um, None of those losses are really terrible losses to have, but the fact is he's on a 3-fight losing streak. He's 32 to the 34-year-old ACJ, Antonio Carlos Jr. Carlos Jr. Did take some time off after this fight against Brucey Soto, came back and fought Simon Biong, who's also on this card, and he finished him by rear naked choke in round 1. I think that Carlos Jr. probably does get to the back of Polizzi. Polizzi is a guy that will shoot takedowns. Neither guy's much of a striker, although I do think Antonio Carlos Jr., he's training out of American Top Team, which, as I've mentioned many times, is one of the best gyms in the entire sport. American Top Team, Extreme Couture, Fight Ready, like those are a lot of the gyms that I rate really highly, especially ATT. ATT, he's getting working with amazing. Trust me, there's people of all sorts of backgrounds: wrestling, striking, jiu-jitsu. So Carlos Jr. has been working on his striking. I guarantee that he already is a really good grappler. I think the grappling is way on the side of Antonio Carlos Jr. He's won all of his fights in the PFL. The last fight he's lost in the PFL, he hasn't lost the fight in the PFL. The last fight in general that he lost was all the way back against Brad Tavares in the UFC in 2021. He's been on a roll in the PFL. I think he does get this one done against Polizzi. I don't think this is going to be like a necessarily easy fight. I don't know if it's going to be like a first round submission, but I do think Antonio Carlos Jr. will be able to get Polizzi down, probably get to the back and work for a submission. If not, just win a decision by out grappling Alex Polizzi. So that will be my pick for that one. Next fight, tough name to pronounce here. Davletsan Yagshimuradov versus Simon Biong. Yagshimuradov, I watched the fight against Jacob Neto was extremely impressive to me. He just basically walked down Neto and finished him. He was an underdog in that fight, I believe, slightly. So very good performance versus Neto. He's another ATT guy, Yagshimuradov. I was looking at his Instagram, and he is training out of American Top Team. I saw him post a few pictures training there. So if he is training out of ATT with a lot of those guys, I think his striking already is pretty good. His wrestling should be fine. It's not like Simon Biong's very good in general. He has way less fights, and both guys are around the same age, 2 years apart. And if you look at Yagshimuradov, he's obviously 22-7, fought a solid level of competition all along. His last loss was to Carl Albrechtsen. But for Simon here, I mean, a lot of his losses some of his losses at least haven't really aged well. Luke Trainer is probably his best aging win, but he's 9-4. So clear experience edge for Yagshimuradov. Training out of a better gym. Simon Biong partly trains out of the same gym as Abus Magomedov and those guys. I know he got some training in there, but I just think Yagshimuradov probably finishes him here. I think this is a tee-up fight for Yagshimuradov. I think that also, I know some people don't really like to say this. People don't really care about the following of some of these guys, but I do think that does have a little bit of effect. Some guys do get certain spots because they are very popular. Yagshimuradov has over 1 million followers on Instagram. I get it. Followers don't mean, everything. But if one guy's super popular and has a huge fan base and Simon doesn't have a huge fan base, I think the PFL is setting up a guy like Yagshimuradov, trying to get his fans engaged, trying to get a big knockout from him to get kind of his fans kind of excited for what's to come next. So I do think Yagshimuradov wins this fight. Simon Biong's been set up to lose. Even in his last fight against Antonio Carlos Jr., that's another setup fight for him to lose. ACJ is way better than him, submitted him round 1. I think Yakshimuradov might be able to knock him out in this fight. It's kind of similar to how he did to Jacob Neto. Next fight we have on the main card is Razor Rob Wilkinson versus Josh Silveira. So, as we know, Rob Wilkinson tested positive for steroids, which is why the Thiago Santos fight did not count, or it was no contest. The fight after that, he came back from steroids and he beat Tom Breese in round 1. I think Rob Wilkinson's pretty damn good. I don't think he's, if he was in the UFC, I'd say he probably would be top 15. He's a solid fighter. I really do think that. I mean, he is open on the feet at times. His striking defense, I do think, is somewhat lacking, but I don't think Josh Silveira is going to be the one to exploit that. I don't think Josh Silveira is going to be the one to defeat him here. Josh is a tough fighter. He has 2 losses on his record. Both went the distance. Impa Kasanganay, who beat him over 5 rounds pretty evidently. And then the other fight he had was against Omar Akhmedov, which he lost. Silveira lost. But Omar Akhmedov's a teammate of his. So I won't really, I get it. Omar Akhmedov's a teammate, so I won't really rate that loss in terrible regard. For Wilkinson, he, as I mentioned, his striking defense isn't the greatest. He does get hit clean sometimes. But one thing I do like about Wilkinson is he does have a come forward bullying type of style. A lot of his fights, he basically is just the bully, where he'll come forward, throw big punches. If he gets you in the clinch, he'll throw big knees, try to finish you from there. He even can mix in wrestling to help him win. He took down Thiago Santos in rounds 1 and 2, out-wrestled him, took his back even. Josh Silveira, on the other hand, his last few fights, he beat Sadabusi, even though Sadabusi kind of just gave up after he got taken down. He beats Ty Flores, Delon Monte, Sam Key. None of these guys are really great wins for Josh Silveira. He doesn't really have any good wins on his record. Kind of when he seems to take a step up in I mean, I guess Sadabusi is a decent win, but that was, Sadabusi just giving up. Whenever he seems to take a step up in competition, it seems to not go his way. I do think Wilkinson will be able to have his way as far as I think he'll be the guy that will be the much stronger guy in there. I don't think he'll be able to completely bully Silveira, but I think on the feet, he'll be able to land the harder shots, and then even in the grappling, I think maybe Wilkinson can mix in some wrestling. I don't think he'll be able to control Silveira. Silveira is a black belt, but I do think Wilkinson is the better overall fighter. Fought the better competition out of the two. Not that Wilkinson's had a super, super tough run in the PFL, but he has ran through every single fighter he's been put in with. Beat Thiago Santos clearly, beat Tom Breese in round 1, beat Omar Akhmedov, destroyed him, beat Delon Monte round 1, Victor Pesta, Brucey Soto. Every single fight he's been in, he's just dominating in round 1. His last loss was 2018 against Israel Adesanya, which is not a bad loss at all to have. I'm going with Rob Wilkinson. Also, these guys are about the same age anyway, so I am going to go with Rob Wilkinson to continue his winning streak. Next fight we have is Patricky Pitbull versus Bruno Miranda. I'm going with Patricky Pitbull. Slight underdog. I don't know who made Bruno Miranda the favorite. Most people are picking Pitbull. I don't know who made Miranda the favorite. Sure, he can knock out Pitbull, I guess, because Pitbull's a little bit older. Bruno's 34, Pitbull's 38. He's a little bit older for the division. I understand. I get it. But it's he should be the much better fighter. I mean, Patricky's fought so much better levels of competition. It's not even competitive. Patricky Pitbull, I know he has a lot of losses on his record. He's 25-13. But if you look at the losses, they're to really good guys. I mean, Clay Collard would beat Bruno Miranda. Alexander Shabaley, Usman Nurmagomedov. Look at all of his losses. His losses are to elite competition. Usman Nurmagomedov. I mean, the Peter Quilley fight, I know he got that one back. He lost by, it was a doctor stoppage because of a cut. They ran that one back and he beat Peter Quilley, so I won't really bring that one up. Tafik Musayev, very good fighter. Michael Chandler. And then if you look back, I mean, this is back in 2015, so I won't even look too far back, but as you guys can see, as of recent, Collard, Shabaley, Usman, Tafik Musayev, Quilley, there's a cut, so I won't really, like I said, I won't really take that won't really hold that against him. But as far as Bruno Miranda, on the other hand, Bruno Miranda, I mean, Brent Primus submitted him, basically showed he has zero takedown defense, took him down with ease, submitted him in round two. Over Albin Mercier, same deal, took him down, ground and pounded him, finished him. Alex Martinez, he won a split decision. A lot of people think Martinez won the fight. Martinez actually was winning on the feet. He got cracked. He got dropped in round one, which lost him the round, but he was winning that round. Martinez was even able to mix in some wrestling. I just think Bruno Miranda, if Patricky Pitbull wants to take the path of least resistance, he probably can out wrestle Miranda. I mean, I know Pitbull isn't really a wrestler. That's not what he does. He likes to strike, but if he's smart here, he'll probably mix in the wrestling a little bit. Even if he's not going to hold Miranda down, just mixing it in, give him something to think about. And I don't think Miranda will throw a lot of output. I think he's more going to just wait for that one shot. Whereas Patricky Pitbull, I think will be throwing a lot of light kicks. I think his punches will also do damage to Miranda. It's not like Miranda has an iron chin. He's been knocked out a few times, so I do like Patricky Pitbull. Miranda does throw some low kicks himself. I don't think they're going to do a lot of work on Patricky. I think Patricky could probably check those kicks or throw power back at him, start to get his timing down. The age, the wear and tear is a concern for Pitbull. Him being 38, him losing a few fights, him getting finished by Clay Collar 2 months ago. There's concerns. I understand there's concerns, but unless he's completely shot, unless he's about to retire after this fight, I think that this is a big step down for him, and he should be able to beat a guy in Bruno Miranda who's nowhere near the level of a Pitbull. Co-main event of the evening, we have Jacob Neto taking on Impa Kasanganay. I'm going with Impa Kasanganay here. Impa Kasanganay should clearly be the better fighter. I think this could also possibly be a round one win for Impa. Impa does have some power. He finished Alex Polizzi in their fight, beat Josh Silveira, Martine Hamlet, finished him, beat Tim Karen by arm triangle. I just think Impa Kasanganay is improving. He's a very good fighter, 30 years old only. Now, Jacob Neto is only 27. Both guys are relatively in their prime or young guys, so both have time to get better. But the experience edge is completely on the side of Impa Kasanganay. The PFL really likes Impa, and for good reason. He's a really good guy. He's a perfect example of even if you lose some fights, even if you get knocked down in life, you got to come back. You got to stand back up and keep fighting. And that's a perfect example of what Impa is. He won the $1 million. And I don't think he's necessarily going to. I think he's still motivated. He just beat Alex Polizzi in round one. Just because he won the. I know, like I said, if you win the $1 million, sometimes you don't get as motivated anymore. But Impa Kasanganay is a guy who we saw him in the UFC. We saw him get knocked out. One of the most vicious knockouts, one of the most viral knockouts in UFC history. The jump spinning back kick. If everyone remembers the Joaquin Buckley knockout, probably the most viral knockout in UFC history, or one of the most viral. And he lost to Carlson Harris as well. Got cut from the UFC. Lost to Raymond Magomedaliev in a fight a lot of people thought he should have won. Then he wins against Jared Gooden, gets signed to the PFL, ends up winning in his first season in the PFL in 2023. Wins all these fights in a row, beats Josh Silveira, dominates him in the championship. A lot of people thought he arguably beat Johnny Eblen. A lot of people thought on damage he should have beat Johnny Eblen. I think Johnny Eblen's a very good fighter. I think Johnny Eblen's one of the best in the entire world. So the fact that Impa Kasanganay went down in middleweight, fought Johnny Eblen, in my opinion, arguably beat him. Now he's fighting Jacob Neto. I don't think this is anywhere close to a Johnny Eblen. I think Impa Kasanganay is getting really good. Kill Cliff guy. Training with good competition, good all around. He can wrestle, he can strike well, he's got power. I think Impa Kasanganay is a very good fighter. I think he could be competitive even in the UFC. I don't think he would be a 205er if he was in the UFC. Obviously, he would probably have to go down to 185. But regardless, I do think Impa Kasanganay is still a legitimate prospect in this season. For the PFL, and I do think he will put away Jacob Neto. As Yagshimurdov did, I could see him finishing Jacob Neto, overwhelming him and finishing him probably early as well. And lastly, but certainly not least, we have the main event of the evening, Clay Collard versus Mads Burnell. I'm going with Clay Collard. Collard is a dog, great fighter. Mads Burnell hasn't really shown much as of recent, especially. The Michael Dufort fight, not the greatest look in the world. I think Dufort's a good fighter, but it's like that loss, I guess, isn't really the greatest, especially when you're fighting someone on the level of Clay Collard. Clay Collard's only lost, especially recent, has only lost to a certain level of competition, mainly guys that can out wrestle or out grapple him. AJ McKee submitted him in round one. OAM was able to out wrestle Collard. Collard was looking solid on the feet. OAM mixed in the wrestling, mixed in the takedowns to win. Clay Collard beat Shane Burgos, who's a really, really tough guy. He beat Patricky Pitbull, finished him. A lot of people thought he was robbed in the Alex Martinez fight. A lot of people think Collard gets robbed in some of these fights. Not the OAM fight, but a lot of the other fights, people think he gets robbed in. I just think Mads Burnell, also I saw him in the weigh-ins. Mads Burnell looked a little bit chunky. He looked fat. Looked like he had a gut on him. And I don't think you really want to have a big gut on you when you're fighting a guy like Clay Collard. He's going to rip shots to the body. I think Clay Collard rips shots to the body very well. I think he could probably break Mads Burnell, to be honest. I don't rate Mads Burnell super highly. I know he's fighting out of a good gym and Extreme, but Clay Collard is a guy who is a complete dog. In any fight he's in, he can just pressure you, uses his very good boxing. He had a few boxing fights in the middle of his PFL reign, if I'm not mistaken. He had a few. I know he lost some boxing fights, but just the fact that he got in there and boxed against legitimate boxers, he kind of used that to his advantage in the PFL because a lot of what he does is heavily focused on boxing. I don't think Mads Burnell is going to really use a lot of effective wrestling or grappling here. I think Collard's the favorite for a reason. I think he just kind of does what he does, just shows that he's a dog, walks forward, rips the body shots on Mads Burnell, and ends up winning this fight. And there we have it. PFL 5 full card predictions. I know some of these fights I didn't really go super in detail about, but some of these fights I feel like are setup fights for a reason. Some of them are very competitive fights as well. The more competitive fights I wanted to dive into a little bit deeper, but regardless, thank you guys very much for watching this video, and as always, I will see you in the next one.